This show is sponsored by Carpet Direct of Des Moines, Iowa. Welcome to Half Full and a Cup of Joe with Joe Fulford. The show that's always overflowing with optimism and caffeine. Joe's got his game face on and his coffee cup full, ready to dive into the world of football. From the Florida Gators to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and beyond to college and NFL football, Joe's got the analysis, the insights, and the passion to get you pumped up and ready for the game. So sit back, relax, and fill up your cup with Joe. And now from West Des Moines, Iowa, here is Joe Fulford. This show is...
Boy, man, I gotta tell you, tonight I'm gonna have plenty of cup, but not necessarily gonna be filled with coffee. And the optimism, well, it's about 50-50, depending on which team you really want to talk about, you know. So it's going to be interesting tonight, and hope you're along for the ride. And we got plenty of things to discuss. Chat room is open. I'd like for you to weigh in on where you're calling, where you're watching me from. I'd like to know my audience, know who I'm talking to, and maybe I'll even give you a shout out. You're surely Joe Fulford here. Half Full Cup of Joe, coming at you live from the confines of West Des Moines, Iowa, sponsored by the fine people of Carpet Direct of West Des Moines, Iowa. For all your carpeting needs in the West Des Moines, Perry, Central Iowa area, give my good friend Benton Taylor a call. He'll be more happy to get in touch with you and happy to help you out and get you all your carpeting needs. Make no mistake about it. I tell you what, for my boys, they need probably, I don't know if they need new carpeting or what, but I tell you what, to this point, it has been dismal. Make no mistake about it. And we're going to get into plenty of discussion about what happened last week as the Gators took on the Texas A&M Aggies at home in Raymond James Stadium. Thank goodness now the three-game home streak is over with, because now they can focus themselves on the road as they travel to Starkville for a noontime game on ESPN against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And you know, I gotta tell you, it wasn't a pretty performance. And from 89, wow, this is 89,993 people, 7 people short of 90,000. Excuse me. Wow, that's interesting. Texas A&M got off to a 20-0 lead, and they just never looked back. They were just they put on a show like you wouldn't believe. They were able to get 18 first down. They rushed the ball for 310 yards, passed for another 178 yards. Nearly 500 yards in total offense against this defense. And I gotta tell you, this defense looked so discombobulated. It was unbelievable. They were just. I mean, you could tell they looked lost. You could tell they didn't know like what they were doing. And for the first time in a long time, you know, I'm starting to whiffle a little bit about my support for Billy Napier. But I'm not totally out of the woods yet on Napier. I'm not quite out of the woods on Napier yet. Because, now I may get into this a little bit later on, but there's only so much you can do as a coach. There's only so much you can do as an assistant coach. But a lot of times, it's the players that are on the field, they're playing the actual game. You can coach them up as much as you want to. But it's how you play the game that really, determines what your team is about. And this defense looked lost. Texas A&M built up a 20-0 lead before they could even get out of the first quarter. And I'm not sure their defense, they had injuries. So they sure as heck look lost. They sure look lost. It was just unbelievable. Watching me from from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, also from Tampa, Florida. My good friend David Benito. He commenting in the chat room, and you guys always, if you have comments, please post them in the chat room. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And David, I'm going to hold off for that. We'll get into South Florida here in just a minute because they're doing something pretty special down there in Tampa with the South Florida Bulls. And we'll get into those discussions a little bit later on. And by the way, let's see here. I got to show you this one because Davian's right. Who would have thought that when they announced the USF Miami game a couple of years ago that they would be playing as two of the best teams in the state? I mean, he tried. Miami and USF are probably the two best teams in the state. Florida State is just horrible. Central Florida is not much better, and the Gators play them down the road. But, Davey's right. Who would have ever thought that this was going to happen? And look, that's not a knock on South Florida. Because Paul Golish, the head coach of the South Florida Bulls, they got something pretty good going on down there. I don't know too much about them to make a comment about them, But from everything I've been watching of them a little bit, they played Alabama tough again. That score last week, I think it was last weekend that they played, right, Davian? Let me know in the comments here. I believe it was last week that Bama played against South Florida. But I'll tell you in just a second. But I really thought no, it was Alabama, Wisconsin. Yeah, it was a week before when they played against South Florida. And South Florida played beautifully that game. They just had a few bad breaks go their way in the fourth quarter that ultimately decided the game. They ultimately decided the game here because Alabama, they played Wisconsin Saturday, and talk more about that in just a little bit. But back to the Gators and what's happened, and they played poorly on offense. Okay, and it wasn't much better on defense as well. They got more than nearly 500 yards of total offense against this Gator defense. 500 total yards. Graham Mertz was 12 of 15 for 195 yards. DJ Lagway wasn't much better. In fact, he was sacked 2 times during the course of the game. Just a total discombobulation. Now, one thing I'll say, I'm not going to try and make excuses here because of the other performance, because it was awful. But they were expecting, the Gators for the most part were expecting their starting quarterback to play. I forget his name. They were expecting the starting quarterback to play, and it wasn't until game time that the Gators have found out that Marcel Reed would be stepping in and playing at quarterback in the game. Because the starter was going to be a game time decision. Now, I don't know how much film they had on Marcel Reed, okay, if they had it. And if they didn't have that much film on him, then the job would have been a little bit more difficult. That's normal, okay? But it does not excuse the poor play that the Gators had. The Gators had on Saturday. And you can talk all you want to about Billy Napier, but judging by the way that defense was playing on Saturday, it's like they were giving up on this coaching staff. And I think more specifically the defensive coaching staff. Because you've got to remember, they have two defensive coaches. They have two defensive coaches. Austin Armstrong, who's a defensive coordinator, and Ron Roberts, who's the executive head coach and the co-defensive coordinator. And Roberts was calling the signals in the game. I mean, I'm not gonna say that was entirely the situation, but you tend to wonder if Roberts didn't know what he was doing. And one other thing to keep in mind too, the Gators were without Trey Wilson. I did not. That's one thing I did not notice until I found out later on. Trey Wilson had surgery yesterday. He's going to be out for this week. Then the Gators have a bye. Then they continue their schedule the following week. When they would take on, ironically, UCF in Gainesville before they go back at Tennessee to play for a 3:30 game. No word yet on whether that be a ABC or ESPN game. Right now it is in the it's flexed between 3:30 and 8 o'clock. So we'll find out which game that's going to be. But I gotta wonder with all this that's going on, the noise that's coming outside about the future of Billy Napier, about Lane Kiffin becoming the new head coach of the Florida Gators. Guys, I got news for you. Lane Kiffin is not going to be the new head coach of the Florida Gators. Just not going to happen. Now, here's something that's very interesting, and it was an eye-opener that I just found out a little while ago. Okay? Oh, interesting. Oh, a little off-the-wall baseball. Shohei Ohtani, the Dodgers, I believe. He has hit 51 home runs and has 51 stolen bases on the year. 51 club. So, congratulations to Ohtani. That guy is just amazing. But as I was going through Twitter a little while ago, Dan Mullen was on a podcast show. And in this podcast show, Dan Mullen insinuated that when he was being let go as head coach of the Florida Gators, he recommended to Scott Strickland that Lane Kiffin be the new head coach. Of course, we all know about Lane. Used to be I believe was head coach at Auburn. His dad, Monty Kiffin, the legendary defensive coordinator, passed away a few weeks ago. But I found that to be interesting. I don't know if it's true or not, but just to hear Dan Mullen spit out that recommendation tells you may tell you something, you know. And I tend to wonder um, where they're go over here. Now, I don't think Mullen will be fired this year. I don't see. I right now I just don't see any scenario. Um, there's some reports out there that Trey Wilson, who has the knee injury, he got surgery on it and will be out for a couple of weeks. He was out last week, and he hurt in the Sanford game, so he'll be out for a few weeks. The story that we're hearing now is that he should be back probably by the either UCF or Tennessee game. But there's this wild speculation going around that Trey Wilson may, once he gets healthy, may use the transfer portal to leave the University of Florida. I don't think that's going to happen, unless, of course, a move is made. Now, I think for now Billy Napier is safe. I don't think that you give a guy 3 years, and I've said this before, and I'll say this till I'm blue in the face, that you just don't give a guy 3 years to turn a program around. I don't care what you. I don't really care what you have in the. I don't really care what you have in the transfer portal. You have to. You have to have time to build your offense to get this team in a position where you want to get them in. And Billy Napier, and for the first time, Billy Napier has his players. So this is Billy. This, and I said before, this is fully Billy Napier's team. Now, unless they just go off and lose the rest of their games, then I think the question needs to be asked about the future of the Florida Gators and Billy Napier. But who are you going to get? I mean, really, when you stop and think about who are you going to get to be the new head coach, and why would he want to come to an environment where the fans are just so toxic? The fans expect a new coach to come in and win the first year? Really? I mean, do you think Lane will leave for the position that he has to go to a team like to go to a team like Florida? I don't think so. I don't think so. And if Billy Napier and if Scott Strickland and the Florida Gators decide to make a move and fire Billy Napier, Florida has set a very dangerous precedent. They have made it clear in this function that if you want to win in at Florida, you only have 3 years to do it. And I see that, and I think to myself, my brain, yes, I do have one, by the way, I had a hard time comprehending that. Have a hard time actually believing that that is what they would actually do. Unbelievable. It's like we wash, rinse, recycle. Wash, rinse, recycle. McElwain, Mullen, Napier, Muschamp. And I've heard his name. I've heard his name being floated out there as a potential head coach. Usually, Joe Fulford here on this edition of Full and a Cup of Joe. They're watching me from South Dakota. They're also watching me from Tampa, Florida. and other parts, Des Moines, Iowa. Thank you for watching me. Appreciate that. Tell your friends about my show every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central Time here on the on Facebook. We're also on YouTube. If you can't watch me live, you can always play back on my Facebook page or on my YouTube channel and watch me. By the way, if you got comments, please post them because I'd like to hear some of your thoughts too on everything that I'm saying here today. I just think that this team needs to uh, regroup itself. And Mullen, Napier talked about this week. He talked about it today about how this team is regrouping and trying to fix their little things and get things, trying and build some type of cohesiveness. Because frankly, that's what he needs to do. That's exactly what he needs to do if he wants to build a winner. And not just for this year, but years to come. And guys, all it takes is another win to get them going. I truly believe that. And you stop and think about it for just a minute. We're 1-2 right now against probably the toughest schedule in all of college football. And the Miami game, people were complaining about that. But look at Cam Warner. Look what he's doing. Cam today was mentioned as a Heisman Trophy candidate. Makes you tend to wonder, is Miami really that good and way above the rest? Or is Florida really that bad of a team? I tend to believe that Miami is just a little bit better. My thoughts on it, please post your comments and what you think about what's going on with this team. As we get ready for a nice weekend, college football, there's going to be some pretty good matchups, and we'll discuss it a little bit later on. Kind of excited, and I'm kind of excited about this weekend. You know, few interesting matches, notably Mississippi State at home against the Gators. I think it's a great matchup. I think it's a matchup that is what's needed. I think Florida can come out and do what it needs to do with the Grand Roots at the helm. Lagway did not have a good game. Yeah, but Joe, don't you realize that Lagway is only in his first year? Yes, people. I do realize that. I do realize that Lagway is in his first year. And and look, people have been saying, okay, Derek Lagway needs to be the quarterback. Lagway needs to be the quarterback going forward. You want Lagway to be your quarterback? That's fine. But you're going to have some growing pains, and you're going to have some losses. How fair is that to Billy Napier? How fair is that to Billy Napier and everything that he's been doing? It's like, I don't know. I think that as we get into, I think that as we get into the thick of this, Billy Napier finds himself in a catch-22 position. Am I better off letting Derek Lagway run this team? We lose games, and I lose my job in the process. I mean, that's what we're talking. That is exactly what we're talking about. Let us remember this. If you want Derek Lagway to run this offense, okay, and hey, look, if the kid plays well, is able to produce some wins, God bless him. I'm all for it. I'm all for wins. But he's just not ready, guys. And we saw that against Texas A&M. You can't expect a ninth grader to come in and play college football right away. That's not what happens. And I got news for you. Florida's going to have to make a decision very soon as to the future of Derek Lagway. Because if he keeps on playing, they're not going to be able to redshirt him for the upcoming season. Hey Tracy, thank you for joining me tonight. Thanks for watching. Thank you very much. Good friend down in Brooksville, Florida, watching me and got questions. As I said, bring them on. But there is a fine line. How far you want Derek Lagway? How far and how bad do you want Derek Lagway to play? If you want him to play, fine. Then for the love of God, please quit bitching about Billy Napier. Quit bitching about Billy Napier and what he's doing with this team. Okay? Because quite frankly, you can't have it both ways. Napier's in position right now where he needs to win some ball games. Everybody's saying, and everybody's been saying, 4-8, 5-7, 6-6. And quite frankly, I would be happy with a 6-6 team. I'm sure Alabama would be happy with a 6-6 team right now. I wonder what would happen if Nick Saban had a 6-6 team on the year. You would see people, Alabama fans just pulling their hair out left and right. Especially my good friend James Ludeman, who I think is watching tonight. I think he's going to join me here in a minute. But would Nick Saban accept the 6-6 season? Given the type of talent the Gators have right now, maybe he would. To talk more Gators, more SEC, all things related to college football and the SEC. My last word I had is that he hosts a show related to all SEC football. I don't know if he still does it. We'll get more insight on that here in just a minute. James Ludeman joining me for the first time this year on the Half Full Cup of Joe. Bobby, hi! Thank you for joining me, watching, and ma'am, if you have questions, be sure to join me here. I know. Just hang on a minute, okay? I know you're drinking. Okay, fine. You're done with that cup of Joe. Fine, I'll bring you on. Good Lord of mercy. I tried to let you rest long enough to have that cup of Joe, my friend, but what happened here? Where are you?
I'm here. It's just a little dark here. Sorry, but anyway, it's good to hear from you, Joe. Good to be on the show with you, man, as always, and appreciate you just having me on, brother.
Hey, man, listen. If you have an open invitation anytime you want to come on and talk all things football for the Gators, SEC. As a matter of fact, let's get away from the Florida Gators for a little bit here and talk about your boys up there, the Alabama Crimson Tide. You have a new coach and Kalen Deloach, but you guys are not missing a step.
No, I mean, listen, when you have talent, it tends to kind of rub off. And there's a player who you might know. His name is Jalen Milroe, who has continued to play at a very high level at the quarterback position. And, that's what happens. I mean, listen, you talked a little bit about Nick Saban and the 6-6. record, a lot of people forget because of all the success that he had. But when he first came, it wasn't just, oh, Alabama was suddenly good. It took him. Now, granted, yes, in the next couple of years they went to their first national title game, but it wasn't all sunshine and roses at first. There was some growth there, and I think it was shown by the university to say, "Hey, listen, this is our guy." And I think of a situation like Billy Napier, who I was very high on. I was with you on this show, and I said I love the hire. I love Billy Napier as a coach. But unfortunately, and this is kind of the difference between Florida and Alabama, is you have a lot of talent on the Alabama Crimson Tide, and unfortunately, there is some talent for Florida. I'm not saying Florida's not talented. I'm just saying that there's not enough talent there to sustain getting anything above 500 or at least close to it. And that's the frustrating part, I think, for Florida fans is when you watch this team, you see flashes of these guys being really good. Listen, I thought when they lost, and I'm blanking on his name. He's the new running back for Georgia. He was at Florida last year.
Trevion and Trevor
Right.
Etienne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought when he left, that was a big piece of the offense that could have really taken the pressure off, the quarterback situation there. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. I know fans are calling for Billy Napier's head. I get it. It's a league. Despite what they want it to be, it's a performance based league, more so in coaching than anywhere else. If you're not performing as a head coach, especially for a fan base that has this pedigree, if you will, of winning, like Florida has had in the past, then unfortunately you're going to be subject to whatever comes from that. Um, Speaking of Kalen DeBoer, I mean, he's been a great fit here. He's won everywhere that he's been. He took a Washington team to a national title game. Yes, they didn't win that game, but they, just the fact that they were there, I think was
Yeah.
enough. So, listen, I'm not going to sit here and jump on the fire Billy Napier bandwagon yet.
No.
Um, but I think it's going to be a very difficult year, and unfortunately, somebody has to answer for that. And I think after last season, you kind of saw some flashes of, hey, I think we could be good, but they haven't been able to answer the bell. And listen, they've faced some pretty tough teams. I mean, Miami is not a throwaway game. Texas A&M obviously is not a throwaway game. So I mean, you can look at it from that perspective and say, hey, listen, we have the toughest schedule in college football. But at the end of the day, that's not an excuse. You have to perform at the level of the SEC, and right now, unfortunately, the Florida Gators are not doing it.
Take me through the early portion of the Nick Saban era and the frustrations that the fans were feeling. I mean, was it a toxic environment? Was the fans just really PO'd at Saban, or were these guys that said, okay, they're not winning. This is very frustrating, but we know he has a plan. Take us through that those earlier years of the Nick Saban regime.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you have a statement that says trust the process, that was established from day one with Nick Saban. Nick Saban came in and said, "Hey, listen, trust the process. We're going to get better. We're going to do well." And there were times they lost to a Louisiana team that was the Raging Cajuns in that first year, and no one in their right mind would have thought that Louisiana would have come in and beat Alabama at home, mind you. It wasn't even on the road, it was at home. So when you sit there and you go, man, it's easy to be really upset at the coach. At the end of the day, it's a process, just like everything else is. Now, the benefit I think that Alabama had is that they already had a lot of star talent at that point. They had Julio Jones. They had all of these other running backs, wide receivers, quarterback, AJ McCarron. I mean, if you've gone through the list and just take out the past few years, but if you go through the list of guys who have played at Alabama who are now having success at the next level, I mean, Julio Jones is a Hall of Famer.
Oh,
Never won a Super
no doubt
Bowl, but
about it. No
never
doubt
won a
about it.
Super Bowl. Came really close, but never. Unfortunately, a freaking meltdown in the Super Bowl against the Patriots cost him that. So, I mean, again, Julio Jones, Derrick Henry. I know Bryce Young is not having success, and to be honest with you, that's not on Bryce Young. That's on Carolina, who is terrible.
Yeah.
Carolina, from the management down, is awful, and I've seen people crap all over Bryce Young, and that's not fair. I get it. He's
No, it's not. No.
undersized. He's undersized. I get that. But listen, when you have management who has no idea what they're doing and who
No.
just is falling apart from the top down, it's hard to be upset at a quarterback for that. Now, he got
Yeah.
benched,
Yeah.
and he's going to, do what Bryce Young does. And I honestly hope that I don't think he'll ever be successful in Carolina. And that's, it's interesting, Joe, when you think about these young quarterbacks who do so well in college and they get put into these impossible situations. Like, look at Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's a great example of that, right? First overall pick, goes into Cleveland, turns it around, and then struggles, and then they ditch him. And now I would argue over 1 and 3 games, or however, 1 and 2 games, 1 year and 2 games, he has been everything that the Bucs have needed and more. And I
Yeah,
was
and we're
the
going to
first.
talk.
I know we're
Right.
going
It
to
was.
talk Bucks, but I was just
Yeah,
saying that as an example of
right.
going back to the original question. Nick Saban had the benefit of having a lot of talent. And unfortunately, Billy Napier doesn't have that much talent for people to be like, okay, trust the process with Billy Napier. Now, if he had some star wide receiver power or running back power, like a Trevor Etienne or something like that, then you can kind of forgive some of that because you can build on that. That's stuff you build on. But yeah, I won't say it was tough in the beginning for Nick Saban because it was really only one season. I mean, they ended up I think they finished just above 500 that first year. They went to the SEC championship the next year, and they lost to Florida with Tim Tebow, who I still argue is the greatest college quarterback of all time. You can argue that if you want, but I think that's a fair argument. And then after that is they beat Florida the next year and go on and win the national championship. So
Right. Right.
it was success, but I'm sure there were rough times, and people will tell you it was tough. But I think it was a whole lot tougher before Nick Saban came in, because there was just Gene Stallings was early '90s, and then there was kind of this lull of coaches who just kind of came in and didn't do well, and they were gone. So I think people would tell you it was a lot tougher before Nick Saban, so they were able to deal with some of the growing pains early.
James Ludeman joining me on this edition of Half Full and a Cup of Joe. I changed my name and got a new logo. I hope
I
you like
saw
that, by the
that.
way.
I saw
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not much of a coffee guy, but I dig it.
Yeah.
I like the show.
Half full and cup of Joe.
That's right. I like it.
You want to hear something sick? Okay, this is we're off topic here for just a minute. I talked to him a few moments ago about Otani of the Dodgers
Oh yes, I
tonight.
know what you're gonna say. I saw this
Uh,
earlier, but go ahead and
Wait a
say it
minute.
because I love it.
Yeah. This was courtesy of Scott Hansen of the NFL Network. 6'6", 3 home runs, 10 runs batted in, and joins the 51-51 club. I mean,
He's the
that's just.
first player in Major League history to have 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in the same year.
Is that what it is? 50 stolen bases?
50,
Okay.
50 home runs and 50 stolen bases. Think about that. There has not been. You can count on one hand maybe how many dominant players there have been over the last probably 10 years. And Shohei Otani has to be right there at the top. Him and Aaron Judge are probably really close,
Yeah.
just because of what they've been able to do. But Shohei Otani might go down as one of the greatest players to ever play baseball. And that's saying a lot. I mean, you think about the
Yeah.
guys who have played this sport over however many years, it's over 100 years. I mean, Shohei Otani is everything. If you're building a team, your first pick is Shohei Otani.
Oh,
He gives you
good.
hitting, stolen bases, he pitches. I mean, this guy, there's just no quit. He reminds me, and I want to say, he reminds me of Ichiro, not just because he's from there, but just because of the ability that he has.
Yeah.
But I think actually he's better than Ichiro ever was. And Ichiro, I think, is one of the best underrated players of all time. I don't think Ichiro gets enough credit for how good he was. But Shohei Ohtani, that guy is operating on a different level from
He's just,
anybody else in Major League Baseball.
he he is just totally amazing.
Yep.
Just totally amazing. Let me ask you this: back to football. If Florida ends up firing Billy Napier,
hmm
and let's say they go after Lane Kiffin, who you and I both know that's not going to happen. Lane's not going to go. You know very good and well that Ole Miss is going to put down a contract that Lane's going to sign. They're not that stupid, you know. But even just by firing Billy Napier, in your opinion, is Florida setting a bad precedent by saying if you come to Florida, you only have 3 years to win?
That's a tough one. I think that's really tough for anybody.
But you know the
You know,
question. You know the
no,
question I'm asking.
yeah, I get the question. It's a tough question to answer though, simply because it depends on the situation that you're firing him for. Are you firing Billy Napier because he hasn't won enough games? Then I think the answer to your question is yes. Now, the process of hiring and firing is not easy in any sport, but in college football in particular, there's not a whole lot of guys unless you're pulling a guy from another school like a Lane Kiffin, who, by the way, I don't think will ever leave Ole Miss. Now, he might
No,
leave Ole Miss for like a bigger. I don't want to say Florida's not a big program, so please don't take this as an
no,
insult.
no, no, no,
But
no.
a
I
but a
get it. I get
bigger
it.
but a bigger program like a Texas or a Michigan or something like that. I'm not saying he'd take either one of those jobs because I think he's got a great setup where he's at Ole Miss. Great offense, a
Plus,
lot of stuff. But here's the
plus,
thing about Lane Kiffin, and it's a great example. Imagine if 3 or 4 years ago, Ole Miss got rid of Lane Kiffin, or 5, 6 years ago, right? The Ole Miss hasn't been a power up until the last 2 or 3 years. So
yeah,
imagine if Ole Miss just said, "Well, forget it. We're done." Like
yeah.
I get the scenario of why Florida fans are thinking that, and unfortunately, I think it has a lot to do with what have you done for me lately kind of situation with Florida. If you're Florida, if I'm Florida and I'm the AP or the AD at Florida, I'm looking at the overall perspective. Okay, so if I fire Billy Napier, then who else can I get? And how much is it going to cost me? If I don't fire Billy Napier, what can we do to put Billy Napier in a better position? And the answer is this: you have to win games. Like that's how you get success. I know it sounds silly to say that, but if you don't win in this league, then people won't go to your school. And if people
No,
don't go to your school, then you're going to be a 500 team or
no.
less. Like
I agree.
that's the problem. Recruiting
I
is
agree.
everything. And I
Oh,
thought Florida had a decent recruiting class.
they
It was
did.
not bad. It was
No,
decent. But
no.
again, if you're not winning games, then unfortunately you're going to be subject to your record. And I
Hmm.
think if Billy Napier is not recruiting at a high level, then I think you can answer that question and say, yeah, we're going to fire him based off of this. But if you're going off of wins and losses, it's tough to answer that because it's a Florida team that has enjoyed winning for a long time previous to what? Probably the last 4 or 5 years, maybe. I
I
mean, they
know.
went to
Yeah,
the
I know.
SEC title game back in 2020 was the last time they were in the SEC championship.
Under Dan Mullen. So, by the way, we talked about here today, and I'll repeat this for you. Dan Mullen was on a podcast earlier this afternoon, and the podcaster asked Dan about the situation when he got fired and everything, and Dan Mullen said, that Dan Mullen said they asked me who would I want to replace you with, and he said that he recommended Lane Kiffin. Now, I don't know how true that is, but if that's true, Scott Strickland didn't at least pursue it, then that raises some very interesting questions right there. I thought that was quite interesting in that regards. One more thing on Florida, then I want to move on and talk about the Bucks. There are rumors floating around that whoever hired that the next coaching hire is not going to come from the AD, but from the boosters. And when you hear that, does that raise an eye with you about that?
No, because I feel like that's kind of the way that it always goes with any school. I mean, whether or not they want to admit it is the question. But I think the next hire for Florida, if it's not Billy Napier, they're going to lean into and say, nope, we're going to stick with Billy Napier, and if they're not going to do that, then the next hire should absolutely come from the AD. I think, again, not to compare to Alabama, but I think Alabama also has a benefit of having a very, very good AD who was the AD before him was good, and he came in and learned a lot from that AD in order to get better now. So
Right.
I think I know boosters have their opinion. I don't want to say
And
for
they have
certain
money.
that, well, they have money, which is their opinion. But I don't want to say that it would be the boosters that would make that decision. But I will say that I'm sure when the AD is out looking for a head coach, they're getting opinions from everywhere, not just from, it's not just the AD going out and doing homework on their own. They're getting opinions like, how is this guy going to fit into our culture? He's talking to the players. What kind of coach do you want? Do you want a guy who's going to be in your face, or do you want a guy who's going to be, kind of lax a little bit, but also pushes you and motivates you? Uh, what he's getting information from the school. You have to find a coach that fits the culture of Gainesville. What kind of person is that going to be? So I mean, there's
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
coming.
of,
Yeah.
opinions. I'm sure there's a committee that makes those decisions as well. So I'm sure it's not just him, but I think the boosters have an opinion on who they would like, but I think ultimately it's going to be up to the AD.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we'll be up to the AD if they decide to make a move. Now let's get into the real let's get into the real conversation. Oh, by the way, before we talk what we really want to talk about real quick around, let's go around the SEC real quick. Anything that's popping, that's raising an eye with you, something that has become interesting to you within this SEC?
I look at a team like Kentucky who took Georgia to the limit last week. What an
Yes, they
entertaining game! If
did.
you didn't get to watch
That
that,
was fun.
you missed a hell of a game. That was a
Oh,
very good
I
game.
watched it. Yes, it
Kentucky had their
was.
chances to win it too, and that makes it even more
Yes,
stressful. But
yes.
listen, man, this conference as a whole right now is just domination. It
Oh,
really
I
is, and
know.
it's
I
not
know.
fair, to be honest with you. When you have teams, and I forgot the exact number. I think it's 7 or 8 that are in the top 12 right now.
Like,
It's some crazy number like that. I mean, of course, Texas is number one. I'm not looking at it right in front of me, but I know Texas
how
is number one now.
could that happen?
Well,
Are
because
they,
Georgia
are
struggled against
they,
Kentucky. I mean,
when,
that's the thing.
right, but you say, is Texas really that good of a football team? Be honest with
Yes,
me.
they are.
Okay,
They
okay.
are. And
Uh,
listen,
I'll trust you
the
on that.
Manning gene has continued down in Texas,
I
and
see that. Yeah.
Arch Manning is playing out of his mind. So again, he's another guy that could be going to the NFL this year, and it would not surprise anybody. He came in and struggled a little bit early on in a backup role, but man, Arch Manning is he is clicking inside that offense right now, and they're going to put up their points. I mean, you're talking 45, 50 points a game. They're not going to run into a lot of problems. So that's the good news for them. I think defensively they do a lot of things really well. They've gotten better, if you can even imagine that,
You know.
defensively. So listen, I'm telling you, don't. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, Texas, Texas, Texas," and I'm kind of with them on that because they're playing at a very high level. Again, it's not going to be an easy SEC schedule. They still got to play Oklahoma, which is always a tough game. So we'll see what happens. But But yeah, they're killing it. But yeah, that Georgia Kentucky game was unbelievable.
Yeah, it really
And for
was.
them to take Georgia to the limit like that, especially Georgia comes to Alabama not this Saturday but next Saturday at home at night,
And
and
you know
that's going
what?
to
And
be
you know what?
rocking.
And you know what? That is the same weekend that Texas will play Oklahoma.
Yep. That
That that
next
that
week is going to
that
be filled with games that are just
Oh
amazing.
man, it's amazing. Hey, listen,
Yep.
I know I've got a little surprise for you in the blue room in the green room there. Why don't you go look at that surprise and I'll bring you back on in about 2 minutes, okay?
Oh, cool.
Okay, just hang tight here for just a minute. Okay, so we're going to give James just a little break for just a minute because we're going to switch our gears and I'm going to put the hat on. I'm surprised James didn't even comment about the bald head here. But these boys right here, the Pewter Power Boys, also
Uh,
known as the Tampa Bay
yeah, a little bit.
Buccaneers, they rolled into town to take on the Detroit Lions in Detroit, a rematch of last year's playoff game, and for the Buccaneers in one of what was one of the more exciting games that we have seen the Bucks play in a long time. 20-16 was the final score as the Buccaneer defense came alive and Baker freaking Mayfield just put on a show like you wouldn't believe. And James Ludeman, as we bring you back into the picture here, I mean that was just I mean that had to be one of the more exciting games that I've seen them play in a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, you got a Detroit team who a lot of people have penciled in as their Super Bowl pick right now, and as well they should. Detroit has a very good team. They have one of the best offensive lines in football, if not the best. Their defensive line is even better than their offensive line, and their pass game with Jameson Williams, former Alabama player, former Ohio State player. Jameson Williams is crazy. Amra St. Brown is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
mean, he
I
was
mean,
just amazing.
you
Yeah,
just look at the names that they have on their team, and you just think, man, that's a win every week. And the Bucks, to their credit, went into a very hostile environment. They played. They didn't play perfectly. There was some stuff, obviously, that they would like to have back. But listen, when you've got a guy like Jared Goff, who is, for a lot of people, is not a top five guy, just go into the red zone and finish. I think it was 1 for 7 or 1 for 8
yeah,
in the red zone. I think that was the most glaring stat of the day, and the biggest reason why the Bucks won this game. They were able to move the ball, but somehow when they got in the 20, they just couldn't figure it out, and it was a lot of play from guys who weren't necessarily household names either for the Bucks. I think that was the biggest thing is the depth on this team is very good, and give credit to Jason Light and Todd Bowles for putting together one heck of and Liam Cohen too for putting together just an amazing game plan for these guys. And there were times when the old Tampa Bay Buccaneers would have folded underneath the pressure of losing the lead in the fourth quarter, and they never did. It never shook them. Baker led them on a drive where he became, in my opinion, a Bucks legend on that drive. Um, two runs. One of them he juked out a seasoned defender. By
Oh
the
my
way,
God! Yes,
in what they're saying, by the way, it could be the juke of the year thus far. I
yeah.
mean
I mean,
dude was out of his shoes.
okay. Let me explain what James is talking about. The Bucks were on a drive, and Baker Mayfield um was providing some running plays on this drive. And for Baker Mayfield, he ran to the right and also made a cut to the left, leaving the defender in his shoes. And they're still wondering if they can find the guy's ACL after that move, James. I mean that was probably one of the great moves. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, was that the one where he scored the touchdown on, or was it on the next drive?
No, it was on the next play because the
Okay,
next
we're
play
doing
was
next play
the
where he
next play
scored the
was
touchdown.
actually And wildly enough, I couldn't believe they had this play in the playbook where it was just a straight quarterback draw, and
Yeah.
Baker ran another tough run pretty much up the middle of the defense, broke 2 tackles, and ended up stretching out to score. I mean, that whole drive was just fantastic, and that was the second run. The first run,
Yeah.
this guy was dead to rights. Give credit to the give credit to the defense, man, for Detroit. They made it very difficult for Baker. They took advantage of some injuries on the O line, but to his credit, he never gave up on the play and ended up running. I think he got 15 on the play. So just a crazy game management by a guy who a lot of people thought was not going to be up to snuff. And I will tell you, Joe, and I said this last year when we talked about the Bucks, I was not all in on the Baker Mayfield pickup.
No, you
I
weren't.
thought
No, I
I
remember
I thought
that.
Kyle Trask deserved a shot. And I wasn't saying that as somebody who watched Florida, but I was saying that as somebody who watched
Yeah.
Kyle Trask, and I thought that he was a
Right.
very good quarterback, and I still do.
Yeah,
But
I do too.
but to Jason Light's credit, he saw something in Baker where you look at guys who come into situations where they're just a perfect fit, right? There have been numerous times over the years in the NFL where guys come in and they're just perfect fits for teams. And Baker Mayfield getting a 1-year deal at basically nothing, coming in, taking them to an NFC South title, taking them to the second round of the playoffs, the divisional
Right,
round,
right, right,
beating the
right.
Eagles at home on prime time, and then losing a tough game to Detroit, but rebounding in this past week and getting the revenge win. I don't think you could say enough about this guy, and he's still
Wait,
really
wait, wait,
young.
wait, 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 wait. You missed the more important point. He re-signed for a 3-year, $100 million deal. So.
Right. Well, there's that. But I was getting well. That was at the end of it, and I was saying
Right.
all of that last year, and these past 2 games. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Bucks are going straight to the Super Bowl because that's just
Mm,
unrealistic. Now, if they do, great, that's fantastic. But I
excuse
think if
me.
you look at some of the predictions where they were going to finish, with 8 or 9 wins, I don't see how that happens. I think they definitely get double-digit wins. I think they now listen. The other matchup that was very interesting in the NFL was obviously over in New Orleans or in,
Yeah,
in Dallas. And when
right.
you're Derek Carr and you get all of your offensive weapons going, that Saints team is going to be very, very difficult. And I'm saying that as a lifelong Bucks fan, but I can also
I
see
know,
the talent
I
that's
know,
there.
I know,
And
I know. They're gonna be hot.
Derek Carr is doing very well, and they basically manhandled the Cowboys in their own stadium, and
Who would have?
that's who would have thought that? I didn't. I
Who would have?
certainly
I
didn't
know
think
that.
that.
Who would ever thought the Saints would actually manhandle the Cowboys? I mean,
Here,
that's just,
here's a fun fact. I don't know if you know this. There were 8 games on Sunday, and I don't remember all of the teams, but I know Chicago was one of them. I
yeah.
know Baltimore was one of them. But there were 8 teams on Saturday that were heavy favorite Las Vegas picks that all lost, like the 49ers, who lost in Minnesota. Like the Ravens lost at home
Yeah,
to
right.
teams that they have no business losing to, by the way. So it was just upset Sunday, apparently all over the NFL. It wasn't just the Bucks. It was upset Sunday everywhere.
I'm gonna give you some interesting stats here from the game on Sunday, that would just blow your mind. Okay, for the Buccaneers, they had a total of 216 yards in total net offense, including 185 yards passing from Baker Mayfield, 12 of 19. And then the rushing department, he had 34 yards, and Bucky Irving, 7 carries for 22 yards. Really and truthfully, that was the extent of the offense. By the way, Baker had a touchdown and 1 INT. For Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions, he had 307 yards passing, no touchdowns, but 2 INTs. Those drives late in the game, I believe, were interceptions, with St. Brown having 11 receptions for 119 yards. Here's what's amazing. The Lions had total net offense of 463 yards to the Bucks, 216, and yet the Buck, including one guy named Aiden Hutchinson who had 4.5 sacks during the course of that game. And the Buccaneers somehow were able to come away and win the game. And that's what's so crazy about all this.
Joe, let me ask you this: if I told you that the Lions were going to have 435 yards of net offense, and would you have said they
No
were going to lose the game?
way. No way.
Not even close. Like
No,
you look at that
not
net offense,
even close.
that game, and with that net offense, that game should have been 42 to nothing or 42 to 10 or something like that. Like you look at that net
Yeah.
offense. And again, that's why I said I don't think the Bucks are happy. They're happy to get the win, and I think they're happy of the way that they performed overall. But I think if you're Todd Bowles in this defense, you're looking at that net offense and going, "Oh man, we didn't have a great game." They
No,
the
no.
difference in the game is that the Bucks were, Lions were not. Like that
Right.
that is, you can take the stats for what they are, but the Bucks were the benefactor of big plays. Chris Godwin was all over the place. They were able to shut down Mike Evans, but again, when you have a two-headed monster like Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, you're going to shut one down, but you can't shut both down. And this was the Chris Godwin show
Yeah,
on Sunday, and credit
yeah.
to Baker for running that offense fluidly with him. But it was big plays, and again, to the Lions' credit, Aiden Hutchinson is one of the best players I've ever seen. I mean, really should have had 5 sacks. They gave him a
Yeah, yeah,
half
you
sack
should.
credit.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But
And Liam
that man
Cohen,
was just, he took
Liam
advantage
Cohen.
of a left tackle though that had, or a right
Oh
tackle
yeah,
that was new.
yeah.
And that was the one thing that surprised me, and I think it even surprised the announcers, is they just didn't have any answer for him. They would
No,
try, and it was just Aiden Hutchinson's.
they even tried to double team him, and he
uh,
was still able to get
But
through.
they didn't
It's
do it
just
enough to me. That was the one thing that
no,
I look
no,
back on and go, man, I
no,
wish they would have done
no.
that more. And there
And
were
even
times
Liam
when
Cohen says, even Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, said today that one of those sacks was my fault. I'll take responsibility on that. And I like Liam Cohen what he's really doing with this offense. Quite a nice change from Dave Canales. Not to say he didn't do a lot of good things with Baker Mayfield last year, but Liam Cohen's taken this offense to a new level.
Well, it's creativity is the difference.
Yeah,
You look at, it's not just run, 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 and then throw. It's a mixture of run, pass, and screens. And some of those screens, again, Chris Godwin being heavily involved in those, were chunk plays that the Bucks really needed to have. So again, I think the difference between what you're seeing now as opposed to what we had last year is it's not vanilla. It's very much, you don't know what you're going to get. You know what kind of play you're going to have, but at the end of the day, and I can tell you this, through 2 games, they're probably not even halfway through this playbook. I mean, there's probably
no.
a whole another half a book that they have not even seen yet. So I think there's a lot still to grow on. I think you have the beneficiary of a Denver team coming in this week who is limping in here, who's still trying to find their identity. Um, they're not a good team, and as we know, the Bucks have historically struggled against teams that don't do very well. Now, granted, they were able to take advantage of the Commanders situation, and they beat a really good Lions team. And now I think you don't really see what a team is or who a team is until week 3 or 4. This is where we're at with the Bucks, and I've said that for years. You don't know what kind of team you have because you could start 0-4 and pop off the rest of the year and make the playoffs. Or you could start 4-0 and completely collapse. We've seen that in
I
Buccaneers
know. Oh,
history.
oh
If
my gosh,
history
yes,
is any,
exactly.
I think the Bucks, it was in 2009, they started like 6-0
Yeah,
or something, some crazy number, and then they
5 and
ended
0.
up
Yeah, 5 and 0, and then
five
they
and zero. I mean,
just.
they ended up
Uh,
losing, not even making the playoffs. So I mean, again, you're not going to see the real Bucks team, I think, until week 3 or 4. And listen, this is a game that if you're the Bucks, you got to win. You got to get it done. You got to beat the teams that you know you can beat, and you have to try against the teams that you may struggle against. I mean, they still have a tough schedule to go. They still have to play Kansas City. That's going to be a very interesting matchup there. Hopefully, they can get some of these offensive tackles healthy this week. I know you're going to probably go through the injury report at some point, but
Well,
you know,
speaking
it's
well, speaking of which, I'm going to do the injury report right now. It's sponsored
yeah.
by corporate director of Des Moines, Iowa.
You're welcome for that segue, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that because I was fixing to do it here anyways in just a minute. So nice segue into that.
Hey.
Um, Jamel Dean, let's give you updates on what's going on. This is as of today. Jamel Dean has a knee injury. He was limited yesterday. He practiced today. William Goldston, he did another knee injury, did not practice. He's limited. Luke Gedeke, the tackle for the Buccaneers, has a concussion. He did not practice both Wednesday and Thursday. He'll be likely be a no-go. Logan Hall, defensive lineman with the foot injury, he's limited. We'll see what he can do. Josh Hayes, ankle injury, limited. Cameron Johnson, also limited. Actually, did not practice today, as well as Kalijah Kancey with the calf injury. He did not practice. He's not practiced at all this week, nor has Vita Vea. He's not practiced at all this week. He has that knee injury. Rashad White, here's what's interesting. Has a groin injury. He's been limited the past couple of days. He might be a game time decision. And Antoine Winfield has a foot injury. He did not practice both Wednesday and today. As far as the Broncos go, the two guys that may not play is Baron Browning, a linebacker with a foot injury. Um, let's see, J.L. Skinner, safety. He's not practiced at all. But all the other guys look like they could be a go. And that's your Buccaneer injury report, sponsored by the fine people at Carpet Direct. For all your carpeting needs, get a hold of my good friend Benton Taylor, and he'll be more than happy to get you set up. Um, so Vita Vea not being in the game, Kalijah Kancey not being in the game. Um, I mean, that might hurt them a little bit, but you know what? I think we got some pretty good backups that can do the job.
Yeah, I think so. Listen, I think Vita Vea obviously is going to be a big loss. That's going to be a tough one because he's just such a presence in the trenches and things like that. But again, this is a really this Buccaneer team has been historically good against the run anyway, and even the past few years they've been historically good. So I'm not really worried so much about it as much as the presence of Vita Vea has been so good. But guys around him have just stepped up. We didn't really talk about this, but Joy Tryon Shoyinka had a great game on Sunday.
Oh my
Was
gosh,
was
yes.
very disruptive, and a lot of people wanted him to go after last year. Uh, and how about the speed of this team without Devin White? So many people were like, "Oh man, Devin White, he's so fast, he's this, he's that." Well, he's gone now, and I feel like that decision again. You look at Jason Light and go, "What are you doing?"
I have no
And
problem with it.
I don't
I have
either.
no problem. I don't
The
think
speed was
I think
fine to me. It was
I
great.
thought they were fantastic, and Zion McCollum and Christian Ezian are picking up the slack. And
Yep.
not to mention Shianka, try however you say the last name.
Shoyinka. Yeah,
I mean, I
you're
mean,
good. It's a tough name.
I I feel like you remember the guys, Derek Burks, Warren Sapp, John Lynch, other players that come to mind. I feel like this is like a new era of Buccaneer defensive players. This is the new era of the Buccaneer defense. This is the new John Lynch. This is the new Warren Sapp. This is the new Derek Brooks. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm starting to get that feeling as the more you watch this defense play, the more you like compare and say, you know what, these guys are pretty damn good.
I think it's a little early to make the comparison, only for the simple fact that they gave up 400 net yards, and that
No,
Buccaneer
no, no.
defense
I
would have
understand
would
that.
have
I
never
but
done that. But I get what you're
right.
saying in the guys who you're looking at as your future. Your
Yeah.
Zion McCollum and your Izian, who was fantastic Sunday. A couple other, they got a third round pick from Georgia, who I can't remember his name right now for whatever reason, but he was all over the field as well as a third rounder. I mean,
Oh yeah,
again,
yeah, yeah.
this,
Oh
this
yeah.
just goes this just goes back to my point of Jason Light knows what he's doing. and he does his homework and he gets the guys, maybe not the best guys, but he gets the guys that are right for the scheme. And these guys are perfect for Todd Bowles' defense. You have speed guys in your backfield, and you have guys up front who can disrupt. And Vita Vea is a huge part of that. And it's going to be interesting to see how that D line looks without him this week, because I doubt he plays. There's no
Yeah,
doubt in my mind he
I don't think.
probably
I don't
doesn't
think.
play. So
Wow,
it's going to be tough. So
wow.
we'll see how that goes. But again, it's your front four working back to your safety, and I feel like that's what the Bucks have right now.
I'm looking at the schedule for the next 4 weeks for the Bucks. They're at they're home against the Broncos and the Eagles. Then they travel to Atlanta and New Orleans. That is brutal. The next 4 games,
Well,
unbelievable.
I think this is the
Wow.
week that you have to win. If you start the season 3-0, I think that propels you. And listen, the Eagles just lost to Atlanta on Monday, so they've got some issues they're trying to work out. It
Hmm.
was not a great game for the Eagles. It wasn't really a great game for the Falcons either, but they were just benefactors of missed catches. So we'll see. I mean, the Eagles are still a formidable team. They still have a lot of good stuff. Atlanta's one of those teams that a lot of people thought would still think that they could win the division.
And you know
Having
what's
Kirk Cousins.
amazing? And you know what's amazing is that a lot of people are not happy with Devin White in Philadelphia. That's what I'm
Well,
hearing.
that's
So I
surprising,
don't know.
right? We knew it
Yeah,
was coming.
that is surprising. We have a lot of great games coming up this weekend, both in college and the first. But I think next week is going to be the killer game, the killer ones next week.
Yep.
What is the big one that we have? What is really the big one that's on this week? USC will be at Michigan. That's one of the big games that's on tap. Let's see here. I'm looking through the slate. Miami will be at South Florida. The battle of the somebody said earlier, my good friend Davian says, you know what? The battle for the best two teams for the state of Florida face off this week.
Listen,
I
South
mean,
Florida, to their credit, South Florida was in that game against Alabama for three
they
quarters.
were, they
I
were.
mean,
It
they
was
they
just like
absolutely were in it, and they were very tough, and it was the fourth quarter that kind of changed
the
the
fourth quarter.
the
Yeah, I know.
difference.
It
Yeah,
just,
but
I know, but they were in there the whole time. Tennessee will be at Oklahoma. That is going to be a
that'll be
great.
a good one. Yeah.
That would be a good one. And there's a lot of other games. Texas plays at home against Louisiana Monroe. Ole Miss against Georgia Southern. But those are probably the only big games. Tomorrow night you got Stanford, Syracuse. Illinois will be at Nebraska, 24 versus the number 22 ranked team in the country. That's on Fox at 7. And then that's probably the biggest game besides Florida versus Mississippi State, 12 o'clock. I'm going to try and watch that game because I'm going to be on vacation and I'm going to the NFL Hall of Fame. I'm going to check that out.
Nice.
So yeah.
Awesome.
So look for some pictures.
Yeah.
As far as the NFL games, New England playing the Jets. Jets are up 14-0 right now. But here's the slate: Giants at Browns, Packers at Tennessee, Chicago and Indianapolis, Houston and Minnesota, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Chargers at Pittsburgh, Broncos at the Bucks, Carolina at Vegas, Miami at Seattle, Baltimore at Dallas, and 49ers at the Rams, Detroit at Arizona, KC at Arizona. Then they have two Monday night games, folks. Jacksonville, Buffalo, Washington, and Cincinnati. So there's some good games. There's some pretty good games
Sure.
on tap for this
His name is
weekend.
Joe.
Hi, who is that?
Oh, that's my son.
Hey, buddy, how are you? Are
He's a
you a
quarterback of
Gator?
his. He's a quarterback of his team, and he's doing
N-
good. He hit 3 passes tonight. It was pretty good.
Nice job there, my friend. Keep up the good work. Pretty soon you'll be another Bryce Young.
What college team are you a fan of? Tell him.
Alabama.
Roll Tide.
Hmm.
Hey.
My my condolences. Hey, listen. Thank
Hey,
you.
my
Listen.
my favorites are Gators, Texas or Alabama.
There you go. There you go. He likes the
Okay,
Gators.
leave Texas out of it, and you're good. You're good with me. You know, I still can't believe they're number one in the country. I
I
mean
can. They're
that's.
good. They're
I
good.
mean, I think it's
Six.
good.
They play
Um,
Liberty on Saturday.
Okay, go away.
they just go away.
Just go
Um,
away.
I'm gonna let you go here. Just by the way, thank you so much for joining me. I really
Oh
do
yeah, of
appreciate it.
course, of course.
You're welcome to come on anytime. I just hope we have better lighting next time. So, uh,
I'm sitting outside. Give me a break.
oh, okay. That I didn't know. So let me as we take a look the next couple of weeks, not just with college and the NFL. What stories are you looking at? What's something that's keeping your eye on? Anything that you're hearing that might be newsworthy, worth breaking, that might be happening?
I listen. I am very interested in the Florida thing because I know a lot of people are calling for Billy Napier's job right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that over the next few weeks. That's kind of been the big story, to be honest. But I'm also very interested in next week in Alabama, Georgia. I think that's
Ooh.
gonna. I think you're gonna really see what Alabama team you have when they take on Georgia, who's ranked number 2 right now. Some argue
Is
they should
that
be still number 1, but
is that at where's that at?
that's in
Alabama? Or is that
Tuscaloosa. So we'll have the benefit of
nice?
having a home game, which is
Oh,
nice.
nice,
Um,
nice.
but you know,
I'll be
and
rooting
that's
for Alabama.
that's going
So
to be a big story next week.
yeah,
Is that'll be the first true test of the Kalen DeBoer era is to see, you know, how they handled the really what some believe to be the number 1 team in the country. You know, the SEC schedule is difficult, so of course Kentucky's going to make it difficult. But that's a game that you circle and go, man, you either have it or you don't, and that's going to be one of those to definitely keep an eye on.
to speak of the Kalen DeBoer area, how are fans? How are fans taking to Caleb DeBoer? Do they like him? Do
I
they
think that
have questions? I mean,
yeah, I definitely think they.
did I lose you? Hello? I think his phone died. Hang on just a minute, because he's not off. He's not off. Okay. I'm gonna wait for James to come back on because I'm really interested in hearing what he has to say about Kalen DeBoer. But while we're waiting on James to come back on, let us remind you next week um, Half Full Cup of Joe is going to be off. We're not going to be on as the wife and I were going to be on vacation. We're going to be going to Ohio. We're going to be seeing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He left me. Done. Well, James, if you're watching, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I really want to get that. I really wish I had that question. I would find it to be interesting. Okay, let me tell you what we have going on. Next week we're going to be off. We're going to be on vacation. We're going to visit the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame, and all sites in between. So the wife and I are looking forward to that. No show next week. Excuse me, of course. That'll be after the Mississippi State game. We'll find out what happens after that. If the story does break about the firing, I may come on and do a little segment on Facebook Live, so you might want to look at that. I want to thank James Ludeman for joining me tonight. It's been great. Thank you all, Julia, Barbie, Tracy, David. Thank you all for checking in and making some comments. I really do appreciate it. Again, Gators, Mississippi, 12 o'clock ESPN. Bucks at home against the Denver Broncos. That'll also be on Fox. That'll be on Fox. 1 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Central Time. You bet I'll be in front of the TV. Thank you all for joining me tonight. It's been great. I've had a great time. And as I always like to say, if you're not a Gator, you're bound to be Gator bait. Thank you all for joining me, and good night, everybody.
Thanks for joining Joe Fulford on Half Full and a Cup of Joe. Don't forget to tune in next time for more football talk, analysis, and fun. Follow us on social media to stay up to date on all things Half Full and a Cup of Joe. And remember, always keep your cup half full and your team spirit full. See you next time.